Welcome to Taste Buds. I'm Debra Eckerling, goal strategist, writer, and foodie. And today I'm speaking with Dawn Lerman, who's a nutritionist and author of My Fat Dad. So, welcome, Dawn. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I really am happy.
So, tell me about your book. Let's start with that. My
Okay.
Fat Dad, obviously, and I should have read the subtitle. It is a memoir of food, love, and family with recipes, as every good book that's talking about food should do. So, tell me about the book, how it came about, and why you think your message is so important.
Okay, so my book, My Fat Dad, originally I was going to write a book because I am a foodie and I wanted to, and I'm a nutritionist, and I wanted to inspire people to eat healthy and how to make fast, easy recipes. And so I was teaching in schools and I was working with kids, and I wrote to the New York Times. I'm like, I have this great idea of how to like create the snacking column. Everything is, this is a long time ago, 20 years ago, 5 ingredients or less. Um, and then, and then like, no response, no response. Then in about 2012, I like wrote them again. I'm like, I would love to create the snacking column. And let me tell you why I'm qualified. I grew up with a fat dad who was 450 pounds, and every week he was on a new diet. And whatever diet he was on, the whole family had to be on. And on the other hand, my grandmother would be like, if you want to be fat, be on a diet. But if you want to be healthy and you want to be at a normal weight, you have to learn how to cook and you have to use fresh ingredients. And if you don't eat anything processed, the food goes in your body and goes out of your body. So I basically wrote the New York Times and told them about my dad and how every week my grandmother would send me a recipe card and a $20 bill. And it was like that link with my grandmother that kind of nourished me through this like turbulent childhood.
And they responded.
After several times, they responded. And my first blog was called Fat Dad, and it was based on my dad was like the 450-pound Don Draper. He wrote many ad campaigns. He wrote Coke is it, Lego my ego, once you pop, you can't stop. So the very food that he was marketing was like the food that was making him explode. And my grandmother, who was my maternal grandmother, would be like, you see how all these foods have preservatives? You need to learn how to cook. So it basically kind of chronicled like my story growing up with this dad who marketed junk food and was getting heavier and heavier, and my grandmother who kind of had all the secrets, in her little recipe cards that she sent me every week.
It's so you had like the food bond
With
in
my
different
grandmother.
ways with different members of your family.
Yes, like me and my grandmother, we love to eat the same way and cook. Me and my dad was all about kind of junk food and fast, easy things. So for my dad, I was only 9 years old, but I had to create like Weight Watcher shakes for him. And I try and be like, okay, let's figure out how to make this healthy. Let's use milk and let's put some ice to give it, some froth, and let's put some fresh fruit in there. It was like before the days of like smoothies and frappuccinos. We used to make all that stuff before it was like really trendy. Yeah, so I bonded with my dad because all he cared about was like his slogans. We wrote Lego my ego as he brought home, these Lego Egos to market, and we were fighting over, he had them in the toaster, and me and my sister were grabbing them, and he's like, Lego my ego. And then he's like, that's it. That's it. This is the campaign. This is the slogan. So like with my dad, it was always about quick, easy, something that would help him lose weight, and then something he could come up with a catchy slogan. With my grandmother, was about like nourishing the soul, and my mother could not care less about food. It was whatever's cheap and fast and on the run.
Really? Oh, that's an interesting character that goes into the story of your life, right?
Oh
Two
yeah,
people with strong opinions.
my mom was a feminist. She was, she followed Gloria Steinem. She was reading The Fear of Flying by Erica Young. She was like, did not want to be like her mother. She who cooked and cleaned. She wanted to see the world. She traveled the world. She had kids at 25 and had no idea how to be a mother. And still at this day, she's like performing on the stage, and yeah, she's like a theater thespian, and like she is not a homemaker. So I kind of had to take on that role. And then I started cooking for my younger sister when I was 9, so she could kind of have that feeling that I had. Because when we grew up in Chicago, and when I was 9, because of my dad's job, we moved to New York. So I was no longer close to my grandmother. So our only link was these like recipe cards. And then I started doing what my grandmother did for me for my sister.
Oh, that's so sweet. And so you have that food connection with her as well.
Exactly. And then she, if we have a very wacky family. Then my sister was in the first national tour of the Broadway play Annie. So when I was 13, I ended up living alone. My mom and sister went on tour. My dad was an international creative director, and they just left me in this big brownstone in New York. And I didn't know what to do. So I just would cook recipes for my sister and like send her little care packages like every day.
Aw,
Yeah.
that's so sad and sweet at the same time.
Exactly. So as I would say, everyone would be like, wait, your sister's the orphan, but you're the real orphan because you're like home by yourself. And then I'd like start a little cookie company, and I would sell cookies on the street, and basically I would give them to anybody who would talk to me.
Aw, but isn't that interesting that it's like your entire life has been food
Yes.
fodder
Yes.
for people, and there really is the strong connection between people and food and community. So why do you think that is?
I mean, food connects you to your heritage, no matter if you're like, there's a quote in my book that Ray Romano wrote, whether you're Italian, Jewish, or anything else, you could relate to how food, family, and the love of both affect how we grow up and live our lives. Manja. And I think every culture has a certain food, whether, no matter what culture you're from. And those food are, memories are attached. Like I say, every memory from my childhood is attached to food, whether they were good or bad. Like, to be like, that is what I remember. Like in that day, when my sister was pulling away in like the limo to leave and I was by myself, what I was making, what it smelled like. Or like when I was sad and I would make something to comfort myself, like chicken soup. Or I'd go into a deli and I'd be like, oh my God, that smells like my grandmother. And I'd be sad. And then all of a sudden I'd be happy. So I think also smells and everything really kind of transport you.
And there is a range of emotion for all of that, for the
Yeah.
sad to the happy, and you can be one and then the other. I mean, I don't know, can you be,
Yeah.
I guess you can be both at the same time, right?
You could be both. You could be like melancholy, but then you smell something, and like you could be sad, but kind of like happy at the same time, that is something is familiar, that something is comforting, even though you feel maybe not happy in that moment. You could feel comforted by a smell, or you have a longing for something that you're missing.
So is there one smell slash food that stands out as like the go-to that you feel the most emotionally attached to?
Oh, for sure. Chicken soup and the smell of dill. Like when I smell dill, it just transports me to being like 3 years old and running up my grandmother's steps. When I was 3 years old when I was little, every year before I was 8 years old and we moved to New York, my grandfather would pick me up on Friday nights, and my grandmother would be cooking, and she would, as soon as she heard the car, he would honk the horn, she would open the door, and I would start running up the stairs, and she'd be like, my little beauty, my little beauty. And I thought that's what she was telling me her name was. So I'd be like, beauty, beauty. And then I'd walk into Beauty's kitchen and I smell like dill and everything. I mean, even at 3 years old, I knew like my house with my parents was chaos, and it smelled like cigarettes and liquor and all kinds of like crazy things. And when I walked in, it was just the smell of like baked kugel and dill and soup, and like I knew everything was okay.
Ah, love that. And so I feel like we should talk about a healthy, easy cooking. A lot of people feel that way, like it's too much time and energy. So what can you tell people to make them believe the cooking, which I now believe is it's a lot easier to cook than to avoid cooking. That takes
Well, my
way more
grandmother,
time.
yeah, as my grandmother would say, a bissel of this, a bissel of that. If you make something like a soup or a stew, there's nothing that could go wrong. You put it in a pot, and whatever you have, if you have a little bit of chicken broth or vegetable broth, and you throw in, if you're vegetarian, just vegetables, or if you're not vegetarian, you throw in meats and dill, you're going to come up with an amazing stew. For baking, I mean, I love I'm a nutritionist, so I like every kind of meal I have to have like a protein, a fat, and like complex carbs. So I'll make like oatmeal cookies, but it's only a couple ingredients. I take bananas, smash them, throw in some oats, throw in a teeny bit of maple syrup or raisins, a little bit of almond butter, whatever I have in hand, a little baking soda, like roll it together and turn it into a cookie. Like everything in my book is like fast, easy, simple recipes. And in the old kind of Jewish, recipes, like when I'd say to my grandmother, she'd like write things down. It was like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And first I was like, well, what is like a little bit, and it was like, she's like, it can't go wrong. Just throw the whole chicken in. If you only have a quarter of a chicken, if you only have a piece, and then if it looks too thick, throw some water. So it's just kind of like judging. So like soups and stews and salads, there's nothing that could go wrong with it.
Okay. No, and I'm with you. I'm following. What beyond soup and salads? And by the way, I am an expert at salads because it requires no cooking.
I do a lot of baking, and I do a lot of things like breakfast. Like I love doing themes. I love like doing breakfast for dinner. So I like make pancakes. And everything I do has a healthy twist. So I like make pancakes, but again, it's like 3 ingredients. It's like eggs, cottage cheese, oats, a little vanilla, and that's it. You blend it in the blender and you pour it. And it turns into the most like delicious, like decadent protein packed pancakes.
Ooh. And I'm already listing like 3 recipes that I'm going to want from you from the recap. So you're giving me first of all, you're making me hungry, which is a good thing, right?
You're going to want the pancakes.
I already, yes, that is at the top of the list because I am a huge fan of breakfast for dinner.
And basically you just throw everything in the blender and then just pour it. And it's so easy and it's so healthy, and it's very high fiber. It's, packed with protein, and it's delicious. And then it also freezes. So then you could just like put it into the toaster oven. I'm also a big fan of like prep. You cook on Sunday and then you just kind of heat it up the rest of the week.
Don't you love it? Would we call it irony that the daughter of the Lego My Eggo, the person who inspired Lego My Eggo, says, freeze your pancakes?
Exactly. Freeze your pancakes. But these ones are healthy ones. That's true.
What is your absolute favorite thing to make and to eat? Is it the same thing?
What is my absolute favorite thing to make? I got to say my absolute favorite thing in the world is chicken soup. I still make it all the time. What is my other favorite thing? I don't know. I love so many things. I love baking. I gotta say, I love baking. So I make banana muffins all the time. I make these Linzer cookies all the time. But everything I make has like a healthy twist. It has oats and oatmeal and coconut oil. So everything I make, so it could be breakfast for dinner. It could be dessert for lunch, because everything has those protein, complex carbs, and healthy fats. And that's kind of like what I love to do. And I love to cook in bulk, whether it's like cookies or muffins or smoothies that I then make into popsicles. So I like making big batches of things and then repurposing them.
That it's logic, right?
Yeah,
and I
exactly.
like that. I'm still stuck on dessert for lunch. I think I could get behind that as well.
Okay, so I make these cookies and I'll give you the recipe. They're called protein pack Linzer tarts. And basically we take almond flour, we take a little almond butter, we take oats, and we put all this into the blender, a little coconut oil, and then just scoop it out, roll it, mush it down, and then we like bake them, and then we put our thumbprints in them, and then we make some like homemade chia seed jelly. So we have chia seeds for like healthy omega 3s and brain health. We have fresh strawberries for fiber. We have the almond butter and for protein. We have the coconut oil for healthy fats. So it's like a complete meal.
Interesting.
And it's a cookie.
And what I'm getting is it sounds like it's just as easy to cook healthy as it is to cook unhealthy, if not more so.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like learning how to shop, right? So if you have like a whole bunch of like fresh, if you have like some basic ingredients in your house, like yogurt and cottage cheese and eggs and oats, or if you're vegetarian, find some swaps. Fruits and vegetables, you could pretty much make anything.
It starts with having a good grocery list, so you've got things that you can mix and match.
Yes, and like when I'm a nutritionist, so like one of the things I do with my clients is I like make grocery lists. I'm like, here's the 5 proteins you should have. Here's like the 5 carbohydrates you should have. Here's like the 5, healthy fats you should have. And then there's a lot of mixing and matching.
Got it. And
So
is there something you know now that you wish you knew before you started cooking?
I gotta say, I was like a trailblazer. I've been cooking since I've been 3 years old. I mean, and from the time I was 9, that's all I did is I would go to my friend's house and I'd be like, my friend's mom would be like, I'm making chicken and I'm going to put soy sauce on it. I'm like, well, let's try this instead. Or I'm cooking like, you know, uh, so I always was like, I'm going to make these muffins or this cake and I'm going to put margarine. I'd be like, no, no, no. My grandmother said you should only use real butter because margarine has chemicals. So I think my grandmother was so passionate about this, and she was a pioneer, and she's been going to like the health food store in the 70s. And that's all we talked about. Like we would spend hours on the phone. It's like in the days when you had the phone cord and you'd like walk around the room, and I'd be in the kitchen and she'd be in the kitchen, and then my dad come in and he'd be like, "What are you making?" And then he'd be like, "Well, now I'm on Atkins. It has to be high fat. What can you make me?" And I'd be like, "Okay, well, let's see. We'll do a cheese omelet, and we'll do eggs and we'll do cheese, but we have to put in some veggies." And he'd be like, "No, we can't use these veggies." So it'd be like, "Okay, well, let's put in some onions and mushrooms." Or then he'd be like, "Now I'm not on Atkins anymore. Now I'm on Pritikin. Now I need a soup." So I'd be like, "Okay, let's see. What can we do on Pritikin? Okay, let's try and make a soup, a gazpacho soup in the blender."
Well, it sounds like you've been training for this your entire life.
I definitely have been training, and that wasn't my first profession. It wasn't until I had kids and my dad got cancer that I did this professionally. I was in TV production before. I didn't like even think of nutrition as a profession. And then when my dad got sick and I was like reading all these books and learning even more about nutrition, like anti-inflammatory and foods that are good for cancer, that I went back to school. I'm like, wait, this is so obvious. I've been a nutritionist my entire life. This is what I should be doing.
Well, it's interesting how the universe puts things
Yeah.
in your path, but also for you, so you're on the right journey. So, what message do you want people to know about eating healthy?
Okay. I'll use my grandmother's quote because everything like my grandmother always said it better. She always had like, with each little recipe card, she'd have like a little mantra. She'd have like a little mantra, and then she'd have a $20 bill. So her mantra was, good food is not fast. Fast food is not good. And if you know how to make a pot of chicken soup, you can nourish yourself for life.
I love that. And I also have to add, chicken soup is also my favorite thing to make because it is the easiest thing in the world
And
to make.
you can't go wrong. And it's so good and it's so satisfying. And it reminds you of like, I mean, for me, it just has so many good memories. Like if I'm sad, I make chicken soup. If I'm happy, I make chicken soup. If I need to make like food for the week, I make chicken soup. And there's so many like different versions. Like over the years, I've changed it. Like sometimes I put in sweet potatoes. Now I add cauliflower to it, like rice cauliflower, which like kind of bulks it up. Sometimes I put zucchini. So with a soup, you could kind of just add as many veggies as you want. For my daughter, she's vegetarian, so I do like a faux chicken soup, and I do it with like a veggie broth. But then I add all kinds of like carrots and dill, so it kind of has like the appearance. And then I make her like veggie matzo balls.
Ah,
Yeah, because
love that.
she loves the smell, but she doesn't like chicken. So
It's the next best thing to chicken. Oh, it sounds
exactly.
absolutely wonderful. Where can people learn more about you, Dawn, and your book, of course?
Okay, well, my book, My Fat Dad, is on Amazon. And I have a website called dawnlerman.net. And I'm on Instagram. And I'm always posting recipes on Instagram. And on Instagram, I'm at Dawn Lerman. Or now I think it says at Dawn Lerman Vaquero because I got verified and it was like, went to what your license says.
Got it. Okay, well, and we will be sure to, well, I will be sure to put the recipe and the links as well. And if you go to jewishjournal.com, and also thank you. I was going to
Thank
say,
you.
and
This was so
also
fun. This was
thank
such a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your family, your history, and your love of making things healthy. This has been absolutely wonderful. And thank you for tuning in to Taste Buds with Deb. Don't miss an episode. You can subscribe on YouTube and or your favorite podcast platform. And go to jewishjournal.com to get recipes. And there are going to be a bunch from this conversation. And read the articles that go with each episode. And you can also learn more at tastebudswithdeb.com. Until next time, remember, eat healthy and bon appetit.